Welcome everyone. Today we will discuss about VR and AR and the past, present, and the futures. We have our world famous speaker, Professor David Schumacher, Professor David Smith, and Professor Rob. First, I would like to give chance Professor David Schumacher.
Yes, hello everyone. So today's subject is a very broad topic, past, present, and future of both augmented reality and virtual reality. And I was thinking to myself, how do I ring that in? How do I have something to say in 5 minutes about that? So I thought I would do kind of a quick topical of the history, the way I see it. And the reason I say the way I see it is just looking around to confirm some of my facts. Uh, I can see that there is some maybe modest disagreement over where the beginning of virtual reality and augmented reality started and what some of the major milestones are. So my viewpoint today is going to be how David sees how this came together, what the big prospects uh, were that drove it forward, and kind of where it's stumbled along and where it's been, where it's at now, and then some exciting stuff where it could go near term and then further down the road. So I'll start back in 1968, and out of Harvard, a virtual reality demonstration that was actually more augmented reality at the time was this huge headset suspended from a ceiling with a camera on top, and it was actually a demonstration of computer graphics for the time. And you have to understand what computer graphics looked like in 1968, where it was pretty much a text uh, computer universe, if you will. And we had the suspended cube in front of a the background of the laboratory. You could see around, but you could see this object. It had this ominous name of the Sword of Damocles, is what this was titled. And I consider this to be the beginnings of both AR and VR. However, it wasn't until 1990 that the term augmented reality came into the lexicon. It was done by a Boeing researcher this time, and it ended up being used in the arcade games that uh, actually machines that I saw in arcade studios at that time. I remember going past one back in those days and seeing people standing up on a platform with this contraption over the top of their head. And I thought, well, this is going to really go someplace someday, but not while they're trapped where they are now. But it did start out from an entertainment system. And then we fast forward up to about 2008, and you start to see something that looks like commercial systems. And they were really in their infancy at that time. As a matter of fact, it was the good people in marketing at BMW that really got people talking about this. Uh, so they had a printed ad of a BMW Mini. And when it was held in front of the computer's camera, it appeared on the screen, and you could manipulate it by adjusting the print document that it was on. Pretty novel for the time. It probably wouldn't generate much interest now, but it was some of at the very beginning. Fast forward again, get up to about 2013, and we have Google Glass. So Google Glass probably was, at least by my estimation, one of the uh, biggest attempts by somebody with a lot of money and a lot of resources to put, in this case, augmented reality out there. And it was really more of a heads up display like you would see in a fighter aircraft cockpit, uh, where you had information presented to the eye, and then they had a camera, and you had a headset that was light enough to wear, but it looked pretty funky. And you were immediately labeled if you wore one of these. But concern over somebody always walking around having a camera pointed where they were looking became a real issue. And I kind of understand that with concern over privacy that's been appearing from the digital side over that time, that I think exacerbated those fears. However, I also think it's a little ironic because just a few years earlier, we had smartphones that came out with cameras in them. And I remember that there was a great concern over the fact that people would be uh, taking pictures and filming, and uh, much the same arguments that came out with Google Glass, but those tended to die down over time when I think people realized that the camera was used to take selfies and to take pictures of food to post on Yelp or other social media apps, and that died down. But the constant wearing on your head, I think, was probably the real issue. And then the first of anything attracts a lot of negative attention, as we know. So Google Glass lasted as a commercial product to the general masses for about 2 years. Now, it was really still a little bit before its time because I really think where artificial, or excuse me, augmented reality and virtual reality really got some foundation was in 2017. And this was not a commercial product, not to be sold to consumers, not to be sold on the industrial side, but was actually toolkits put together for developers. Both Apple and Google released 2016, 2017 development kits, software development kits. Uh, Apple's is AR kit and Google's is AR Core, which was a departure from an earlier set of tools that they tried to do. And those allowed software developers to not have to start from scratch every time they wanted to develop an app that would support VR and AR, especially AR. So these tools are very, very important to the industry because at that point, that's when you can start getting some traction on the software side. However, out of that time, no dominant application, no killer app, as they say, really emerged. Hardware continued to increase, and actually hardware sales were good. And that was about the first time, that was about when I bought my first VR headset and started to experiment with it. But I too didn't find an app that I couldn't live without, and it still remained a novelty. However, retail and some other businesses became interested in this because I think they saw some of the future of virtual retailing, even that early, even before COVID, which tend to magnify. So because retail took an interest, investors took an interest, and we started seeing investment money pouring into this. And I think that's really helped us as we've advanced and fast forward now to 2022, and we're seeing industrial applications from both Microsoft HoloLens and also from Google's Glass. And then there's a third player that I think may turn out to be really dominant as well. So where do we go to the future? Well, we need better hardware. If we could have AR glasses, for example, that were about like the way the glasses are that I'm wearing today, to where they're unobtrusive, where they don't make you look like a space alien when you wear them, I think they would be much more acceptable. You wouldn't have that lightning rod effect that I think the Google Glass did. But I think we can do even better than that. I've recently seen some articles, one in particular, about uh, uh, augmented reality contact lenses. Now, this is still very far out, but that is the way to go, at least in the near term, because some days I wear contacts, some days I wear glasses, most days I wear glasses. A lot of people can wear the contact lenses. And if you can have that additional information fed to you, like it would be really great to be staring into your camera and having my show notes popping up inside my glasses so I could talk directly into the camera and make it look like it was all very impromptu. But we're not quite there yet. But I do think that's near term. I don't think that's very far out. Now, what's a little further out that I can get really excited about is nanotechnology. And I think if we can bypass the eye altogether and feed information, say, directly to the optical nerve or even somewhere into the brain that processes this information, then we can have a persistent 24-hour a day augmented reality experience that would become quite useful. That is further out, that's down the road, but that's a goalpost to shoot for. So there's my history, past, present, and future in a nutshell. Thanks, Sharif.
Excellent, excellent, Professor David Schumacher. Professor David Smith.
Well, I was intrigued by your topic, Sharif, and David, thank you for uh, the background and your thoughts there. Uh, I'm actually going to go back further than you did, David. And really, the first concept of augmented reality was in 1901, well before the computer. And Frank Baum portrayed a scenario where a set of electronic glasses mapped data onto, onto people, and it's called a character market. And that was really one of the first places where you saw AR begin to be used. And you saw it in cinematography in 1957 and going forward from there. So it's a concept that has captivated people's minds, like I said, even before it became a digital phenomenon like we have it now. Um, uh, Let me just step back 1 minute and do something that Rob often does, and let me do his since his chair's empty.
Mm.
Uh, Virtual reality refers to a fully immersive experience in a virtual world. So it's real. The goal of virtual reality is you become part of this artificial reality.
Mhm.
The augmented reality refers to a modified view of the real world. So it's a supplemented view of what you're doing. And today, both of them require a special device. And as David said, some of them are bulky. The new contact lenses, which have been announced actually now by two different companies, are a step forward. But one of the problems you have with it today is that there's a medical condition called vengeance accommodation conflict. And what that is it's one where one person's brain receives conflicting information about the distance between the eye and the objects.
Mm. Mm.
And that causes problem people with virtual reality in some instances because we're seeing this virtual image that in the virtual image it says it's 10 feet in the front future of us, when in reality it's an inch from our eyes.
Mm.
So that is a medical condition that's actually hitting on this, and it's one that I think there. And the other one, which has impacted me when I've been doing virtual reality, and particularly uh, immersive virtual reality, is you get bruised a lot. You run into people, you run into furniture, you hit things, you break things
Mm.
because the immersive virtual reality is so intense that you actually think you're in this environment when you might be standing in your living room or in your office or other stuff to do. And it's I can go back and close the other role here in a minute. If you look at AR and VR, there's multiple types. You have the immersive virtual reality, like we talked about, and this is the one that where most people are familiar with it. It's the recreation of our world in a computer-generated environment, and some of the best example of this is some of the video games and things like that. there is a nuanced twist of that called cyberspace VR. And it's also known as text-based virtual reality, where it uses environments constructed out of text, constructed out of, and internet's a good example of that. You also then have the metaverse, which the metaverse is a VR environment created out of graphics and interaction. Then you have augmented reality, like David was talking about, and this particular type of augmented reality is a virtual reality environment, though that's built up on top of our world. And it's a place where we see and interact in the real time through this imagery. And some of the things that made augmented reality popular was years ago with Pokemon Go, where you begin to use that. But augmented reality is coming up in many, many, many applications in business. We've talked before about how it can be used to help repair parts, where it can be used in building and inspections, and there's so many different applications. And there are other types of mixed reality that go with it. I just saw a very interesting new application of virtual reality from a company headquartered in Austin. But these was some of the guys who were the general manager and founder of IBM Watson and stuff. And it's a company called Spark Cognition. And what they've done is they've built north of Austin in the middle of the country, a augmented reality, virtual reality, AI playground. And I was recently up there, and they were showing one example of augmented reality that is mated with artificial intelligence that I really think is going to be one of the big game changers. This company has contracts everywhere, but this was one where it was a military contract, and they were showing how you could take the virtual reality glasses, take a broken down jet engine on a stand, and with the AI in it, the AI would prompt you in the virtual reality environment on what to do, what tools to get. It would say, hold the tool in front of, that's the wrong one. It would go and say, well, no, to take that part off, it's the screws here, but you also now have to go around and look on the other side and do one there. And I can just see so many applications of that it's fantastic. The other thing that I see, and this is just what's coming out now, and there's a couple of makers of this, is they are making prescription augmented reality glasses. And there's a couple of companies, North, Visit, and NVIDIA has actually just announced their prescription AR glasses as well. And again, we're seeing this technology beginning to be applied and combined with others. We're seeing horizontal convergences across many different vertical domains that can be used with it. And I think that is where we can see this going. Some of the promises of particularly augmented reality early, like, gee, it will pop up and tell me who I'm meeting, their background, so I can look intelligent and stuff. You're seeing that synthesis of that type of convergence finally beginning to come together. And things like the artificial intelligence enhanced virtual reality to repair stuff. To me, I mean, I wish I had that here when I'm trying to go and fix my washing machine, or something's going on in my car, where it's not just me seeing a video about it, but actually it's interacting with me, giving me the help, giving me the advice to do it in real time. So that's my first thought.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Professor Rob, what you want to add?
Well, so you've already had some background on augmented reality and virtual reality. It's an area that I've been studying since the 1990s. The augmented reality, the leader in augmented reality at the moment is Microsoft with the HoloLens. Their focus is on industry. It's in common use in aerospace and military, largely as a maintenance, manufacturing, and support tool that allows somebody to work on a piece of complex equipment and receive guidance as they're working either from a remote observer. The headsets have cameras, or from some type of digital document that overlays what they're working on and shows them what they need to do. It's really handy, a really handy way to improve the skill set of people that are working on complex equipment, particularly complex equipment that isn't very standard. In other words, where each particular piece of hardware may be significantly different than the last piece of hardware they worked on, and that allows them to basically review the documentation while they're doing it. There are variants of the HoloLens. Lenovo has one that's specifically designed for manufacturing line workers, where they take the weight off the head. The downside of the HoloLens is everything is in the headset, which makes it somewhat heavy, and makes it tough to wear for an 8-hour shift. Lenovo takes much of that weight and places it on the worker's waist or remotes it. So it lowers the weight and allows for somebody to work for several hours with the headset on without having fatigue. As pointed out, there have been several attempts on the consumer side for augmented reality. What augmented reality does is it tends to put a rendered item in your field of view through a lens that also allows you to see what's in the outside world. So occlusion is typically the problem when trying to do a consumer version of augmented reality. Occlusion means that when you have a rendered object, you can't see through it. It looks solid. It behaves like it's real. And we've had issues with regard to occlusion in most every consumer attempt to do augmented reality. They mentioned Pokemon Go, which was a cell phone based implementation where you used your cell phone to see in the world. And there was a video of back in the mid 2000s from Hewlett Packard that showcased how you might use a cell phone in a broad game with a couple of kids that ended up kissing the princess. I have a feeling the kiss on the princess's lips was virtual, would be a little less than overwhelming. But it did showcase kind of the promise that never developed for augmented reality. Google's attempt for a low-cost consumer headset called Google Glass set back the industry quite a ways. They decided that instead of doing a real beta test, they were going to charge people for the beta headsets and let them experience paid beta experience. And anybody that's been a beta tester knows there are a lot of problems with a piece of beta hardware that's not really ready for prime time, and forcing people to pay over $1,000 for a headset and experience all the fun of a beta project really didn't work out well. And the nickname for folks that wore the headsets, which also had cameras, were glass holes, because people were wearing them in places like bathrooms where folks were a little bit uncomfortable about being brought underneath the view of a camera. So it just became problematic. Then we moved to virtual reality. Virtual reality is everything is generated by the computer. No aspect of it is real. Virtual reality headsets in market. You've got the Microsoft headset here. This is a Samsung version of it. This is they started to have cameras in them initially to avoid people having the experience that David Smith did, tripping over stuff, so that it would alert you if you were close relatively quickly, because a lot of people were getting damaged, getting hurt. And then you have the issue between tethered and untethered, though PC-based stuff. This is the Oculus Quest 2. This is untethered. The trade-off, however, is, of course, when you've got a full personal computer hooked to these things or a workstation, you can get a much better experience in terms of graphics performance than you can if you're talking about a Qualcomm chip in an untethered. But with the untethered, you can move around. You don't trip over the cord. And there is a debate about whether Facebook's on the right track or the wrong track. I would argue probably wrong track, given how much red ink they're generating with this overall effort. There was a disagreement inside Facebook. The people that were leading the effort felt that they should come in from the premium side first and then cost reduce it. Zuckerberg felt they should come in at the low end first and then increase the price, which is very similar to what the Microsoft VR headsets were. And it's been less, let's just say it hasn't met expectations as a result. Generally, the market behaves much better if you solve the problem first, provide a high-end experience, get people excited, make it exclusive, and then drop price. So then you're able to fulfill that demand over time, and the market never stalls. If you disappoint large portions of a market, they tend to abandon the technology and walk away from it. Quadraphonics was an example of that. The 3D TVs were another example of that. Folks just moving too soon, too aggressively with a technology that wasn't there yet and focused too much on price point and not enough on experience. Now, beyond AR and VR, we have mixed reality and extended reality as kind of supersets. Mixed reality is when you have what is basically a VR headset where you are potentially rendering everything, but you also have cameras that render what's in the room or at least index it. And that allows you to move with a virtual experience through a real environment with virtual overlays and get something that's very different. That's costly. One, you need a lot of computing power because you have to scan everything, you have to render it, and then you have to provide an experience that the viewer sees as real. I've been through several demonstrations of this. The issue comes down to a performance limitation. It tends to be fairly cartoony. On the other hand, it is kind of cool to look around your office or whatever and feel like you're in some kind of an anime where stuff is interactive. The one I liked the best was when the giant rips the roof off my office and reaches down and tries to grab me. And after a little while, you kind of get into it, and it is a bit hard to step away from the fact that it is not real. That's kind of the idea of the future, as you'd have a headset. That headset would render the world in which you'd want to see it, and so if you wanted to believe you lived in the Middle Ages, you could. Everything would look like it was from that period, and you could see everybody as an orc or a elf or whatever, a monster if you wanted. And it would look real because when you're rendering everything, occlusion doesn't become a problem. It's no longer a problem because everything is rendered and the computer then fits everything together so it looks like it belongs. And so it can be a much better experience, but admittedly it's very costly. And so far we don't have anybody doing this yet other than in labs. We move to extended reality, and that's just it's a superset. All of this stuff, it's been used to talk about the entire category, and there is a sense that this is going to converge. If we get occlusion right, we can do low-cost headsets and things like lenses for glasses, and do some of the interesting things with optics that require relatively low power to solve the problem. And if we can't, we're stuck with the headsets. Which leaves us with what is the major problem with this entire class, particularly if we're talking about a consumer implementation. People, and we learned this from 3D TVs, people do not like prosthetics. They do not like to wear a heavy piece of equipment on their face, or even glasses if they can avoid it. And unless we can overcome that kind of a problem, because if you remember those 3D glasses, they weren't much. They were like dark glasses, particularly the passive ones. Were basically polarized dark glasses, and people just didn't want to wear them. Granted, a number of people got sick as well, but getting people to wear glasses, since we spend an awful lot of time convincing them that glasses are bad things and they should get eye operations or wear contact lenses or whatever to avoid them, then coming up with a technology that depended upon glasses became problematic, because you now have to overcome the stigma that you've created with those prior efforts, and that has never successfully been done yet. Nobody's even really attempted it yet, and that creates a problem with the overall advancement of this technology in the consumer space. Because until people get used to wearing prosthetics and these headsets, that we will be unable to build the market potential that otherwise would exist, and that pretty much stands against it. So for the most part, right now, the money in both in these areas largely resides in the commercial space. That's where people are making money today. VR is being used predominantly for training and simulation. AR is being used predominantly for field tech work, manufacturing, assembly, and to a certain extent training as well. Although VR, I think, lends itself to a broader array of training scenarios, both civilian and military, where it's been performing reasonably well for a long period of time. That particularly helps with regard to military because some of the aircraft have similar headset setups with regard to how you operate the different weapon systems or how you operate in low light or no light environments. And so the prosthetic aspect of the headsets aren't an issue. In fact, you duplicate the helmet, you duplicate the mil-spec headset in the VR rig and then put them in a simulator. And they can get an experience very much like they would get flying a commercial airline or a jet or even a tank without having to put them at risk or incur the cost of spinning up one of those very expensive pieces of hardware for just training. So in the end, it shows a great deal of promise. It's part and parcel of what we call the metaverse. The metaverse will be an environment that we will largely live in and explore through some form of extended reality. What that form will be is yet to be determined. The limiting factors for that are haptics and the ability to actually immerse physically into the environment. We talk about these virtual environments as visual, and clearly AR and VR is visual, but to immerse yourself in it, you need sensory inputs. You need sensory vests, gloves. We may eventually need immersion tanks as we look at this. I mean, just watch the movie Ready Player One. It anticipates that future world where you drop into the world and it would feel like you were there. You would feel pain if you were hit. You would be able to touch things. You would be able to hold things through haptics and mechanics and get a sense that you could walk into a virtual world and experience it much the same way that you would experience the real world. Some of the other interesting areas that are being explored as we move towards autonomous cars is turning the windows on autonomous cars into screens and having them show whatever landscape that you selected. So you could be driving out in the middle of Interstate 5, which is an incredibly boring freeway in California and in the West. And you could be looking out at like you were driving through some movie landscape or dragon fields, a Game of Thrones, or through the 1800s or even all the way back to the time of the dinosaurs, and it would look very real to you as the car drove itself. Granted, you probably wouldn't want to do this if you were driving the car, because if you swerved to miss a virtual dinosaur, the guy in the lane next to you might object to that behavior. But as long as the car is driving itself, basically the automobile becomes a moving entertainment center where the graphics change with regard to what it is you're doing, and it feels like you're there. Some of the demonstration has been pretty impressive. The kids love this stuff because then they can sit in the car and they can shoot dragons or whatever and stay very much entertained, while the parents can be watching something else on the windshield, a movie or whatever, or just experiencing maybe the history of the environment they're driving through, where there are little explanations or windows that are popping up over the buildings telling you the background and what occurred, or as you drive into a particular area, some of the history and some of what made that environment or that particular area unique, while you see what that area might have looked like during that period of history that it is sharing with you. So it would be an incredibly rich experience, but something we likely won't really get to see until we get to level 5 autonomy in cars, so something after 2030, even though we can do the screen and emulation metaverse stuff today. So it's an area that's in its infancy still. Commercial is where it plays and where the revenue is. A consumer may or may not appear. It's not where the smart money is at the moment. And some of the companies that play heavily on the VR space are companies to watch. Hewlett Packard has probably the most affordable high-end VR headset, and Varjo, VARJO, is the company that has probably the best headset for the money in the space. And the fact I'm talking about a company that you guys probably never heard of, showcases just how little VR has penetrated outside of the Facebook effort into the consumer mentality. So it's something to watch. Be aware that the headsets are getting smaller and lighter. That's what we're looking at this particular point in time. There is a third category of headsets to watch, and that's just head-mounted displays. Lenovo has one of those in the market. There are a couple other companies that have entered, and these are basically just screens, glasses you put on your head that are computer screens, and they do much of the entertainment things that you might want to do with the headsets, other than virtual reality, like the ability to see stuff without having anybody to look over your shoulders, or watch movies that probably are inappropriate for airplanes. Like any R-rated movie is a little uncomfortable to watch in an airplane, especially when you have kids in and around you. And you can do that with a headset without too much trouble. And I was watching episodes of The Boys on my last flight with my headset. And it was far more comfortable to do it that way than have that show on a PC screen, because that show is exceedingly violent. So that's kind of where we are. I've got to ring off. I've got to do radio after this. So this is my only input into this session. You guys have fun. Hopefully I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yes, Mr. Sheridan. So I know you're an expert of VR and AR, and we are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good, excellent. I really, David and Rob, excellent presentations, background. I don't need to go over all that. I'm Sheridan Tatsuno. I'm a co-founder of actually 3 virtual reality startups since 2016. So I'm going to focus more on the practical use cases, not the technology, because the others are doing a superb job describing the technology issues and limitations. I will focus on user interface, user experience, use cases, and business models, because that's what everybody's trying to figure out right now. And I'm a business person, and so that's my job to figure out how to make money using VR. So the first company I co-founded, OneReality.com in Sweden, and we use the Unreal 4.0 gaming engine to develop sustainable cities. Copenhagen, Malmö Port, the Lund 2070 plan, a new town of 50,000 people created from scratch north of Stockholm, and then the waterfront in Malmö. So we did that. Our developer he goes back to the mid 90s. They were using $1 million machines and $100,000 headsets at Sweco. So they had 20 years of experience using VR for engineering construction. And one of the things I'll mention is that all technologies start at the top, usually the Pentagon and NASA in the United States, because it's very expensive, basic research. And then it comes down the price curve. We call it the average sales price, then into major corporations, then to middle-sized and smaller businesses. And then the last, and then the upper income, and then the mass consumer market. So that's where I agree with Rob that Zuckerberg is trying to come at the very bottom. And that's the hardest. So the good part is that for enterprise at the high end, VR has been used for years, and it's really practical. The use case, you can make money on it, and I'll go briefly over what we did. We scanned in the Copenhagen Malmö port, and they were trying to bring in Chinese ship containers to building a new port 30 miles long. So we created the whole port, and we showed the operation so you could get on top of the imaginary port or dock that didn't exist, where you could sit on top of the freighter coming in the containers, and you could sit on top of the cart inside the thing, or you could be the crane operator, and we'd show the cranes moving the containers to the train. You can't do that in 2D, and it's immersive. So you could either look at it with a flat panel. Oh, by the way, one of the things that back then, and even now, most people don't use VR headsets for a lot of reasons, and it's cost, speed, everything else. So we designed everything for 2D, tablets, smartphones, PCs, TVs, and so it worked fine for presentations. So often to show people, we would have our guy wear the headset, and then he would project it onto the screen so you could see his point of view or another point of view, so he could actually see himself in the VR model. So we did that, and that way everybody could use the VR. And then we sold real estate. So we sold, our investor was a private developer, and we built Swedish homes, and we in detail. It's like IKEA in really detailed, a bit high res, and you could walk around. Now, one of the problems that everybody had was bumping into things. So what we did is we just used swivel chairs. So we didn't require anybody to walk. You just sit in the swivel and you can go around 260. And then you would go forward and backwards, either controllers or we use pinching for flat screens. So then you'd pinch, but to go fast, we use targets. You would have targets and you would just click on it and it'd go fast. That way you wouldn't get carpal tunnel syndrome because pinching gets tiring after a couple hours. So we would go really fast. So we figured out that bumping problem like 5 years ago. Okay. And that's unnecessary. Just people have to use their imagination. So a good part is just get a swivel chair and you can do whatever you want. You could float or fly. The other thing too is that we did for real estate, most designers are worried about the high res, which Unreal does very well. But most home buyers want to see what it's going to look like. So we had avatars, we had parties, we had CNN television going on, we had stereo sound, so you could walk around and hear exactly what the sound would be like because the engines are really good in acoustics. So you can actually see exactly what you want. Now, the home buyers, especially the wives, loved it because we would get a standard house and they say, I don't like the kitchen. I want a longer granite top. So we could just move it and literally within minutes, they could change the length of it. And so the buyers could actually design their own home because we were also, besides scanned in, which is already fixed, which is not as good, we did from scratch. We just gave a model and then the wife and husband could say, we want to do this, and can you move this? Can you move the kitchen here? Can you add a window and the lighting? And we would do all that so they would get a custom built home. So, and then we also sold furniture, which the realtors liked because it made extra money. So we worked with the CAD companies, the furniture companies, and then we used to drop and drag. So your home became a Home Depot. So you could drop and drag any couch, furniture, painting, whatever you want, lighting, and then you could buy it right there. And the furniture people loved it, and the realtors made money off of that. So they said, wow, this is better than selling, walkthroughs because you could sell furniture. So AR could also do that. So I think that's the big business model case for consumers is being able to, just for initially AR, superpose furniture off the CAD because you don't have to design it. All the furniture people have the CAD design, and then they just put it in the library and you drop and drag. That's what we did. This is drop and drag your own house, and people love that. So that's the business case. Now, we also did it for emergency housing for the Syrian refugees, because Sweden accepted, 150,000 in 2015 after the war. And there was, really serious, housing shortage like here, 700,000 units of shortage out of 10 million people. And then the Syrians came in. So they had like 10 or 15 people in the apartment. So the Swedes said, we need housing fast. Can you do it? And you say, and we could do it literally. So what we did, Sweden takes 1 year to get approval for design. What we did is we had Archaea homes, which is 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom homes, right? Standard, or even 4 bedrooms. And then we already have these drop and drag. And then the housewives and the husbands could just design it the way they want. Okay, so we would put together drop and drag, and we'd have like 150 or 200 units in a housing complex. And you could do that literally in days. So we could, and then the planners could see it and get approval literally in 2 weeks, not 1 year. And then they could just build, because our home builder was a builder, so he could actually build it. And then the good part is that in the Unreal and Unity, you don't need to be a designer, okay? Because the engineers already do that. The architects already do it. So they take their Revit models, the CAD design, so you can tell them, here's what we want, and then they design it, and then just drop it right in. So in many cases, we didn't even have to build a house. They already had the models. We just take a piece of land and just drop it right in, and you can walk around inside. So for enterprises, it's really useful. Public housing, rapid housing, very high and low end, affordable housing, and that's a big problem worldwide right now. So I think one way to address the affordability problem is, besides the zoning, which is the issue, is providing really rapid design and building of homes to get the costs down. And I think, and one good part is that the designers are really creative, the interior designers, and it's amazing. They take multi-use. They take these little apartments and do really amazing things with it. So that's the use case there. We also did the Nobel Prize. I won't go into that. Now, the use cases, the killer app, I think, is going to be climate disasters. And the reasons we ran simulations, we did hurricanes, wildfires, we did flooding, and with the Unity and Unreal, because I hate to say it, the game was like destroy things. So we actually ran a 180 mile an hour hurricane against some of our buildings, and you would see them just like flying apart in some cases. So you could simulate design. So we recommended, after doing the simulation with hurricanes, is to do more rounded buildings like saucers up 10 feet so the flood water wouldn't take it away, in Florida, places like that. So, you could simulate future disasters and wildfires. So we did that like 5 years ago. So that's the use case. Now, one of the problems that most people lack imagination about how to use VR. So what I did is I wrote actually 10 novels. Here's my link, which is based on what's existing today and what's possible, which Rob and David described, what we can do in the next 2 to 5 years with Unreal 4 cities. And I looked at social cases like homeless shelters, shopping malls, things like that. So practical things you can do today, right? And so the novels it describes it. Now, the one that really grabbed me, and then actually, I'll tell you what happened. The Chinatown was trying to rebuild, but the kids from Cal came up with creative ideas, and they create the Tang Dynasty in detail, 1 million people, and they turned that into a shopping mall. So you can buy anything you want in the Chinese shops in the Tang Dynasty. I was going, what? This is crazy. Paris just announced for the Paris 2024 Olympics, it's going virtual. And so if you see now, they're just beginning. Paris for the last 5 or 10 years has been planning for virtual reality, all of Paris for tourism, everything. And now the Olympic game is going to launch. So I thought it was just a fantasy, but the Paris just announced the early beginnings of it now. So watch, I think the French are going to try to take the lead on this one. And then China has also begun to launch virtual cities now. So watch them carefully. So I think there's going to be a race between the French and the Chinese and other nations to show off virtual cities. And the big one is going to be virtual tourism. And then the other use cases, climate projects, big mega, like when you're designing roads, whatever, you could do flooding or whatever you want. So I think those are the big use cases. And so I think I'm very optimistic because we already know how to make money in architecture, engineering, construction, AEC. We know how to use it for medicine. My new startup we just launched we do AI VR avatars for personalized medicine. So we just launched a virtual hospital in a virtual medical school and in our virtual city. And our CEO is at MD, but he's also a gamer who actually designs. So he actually used the Unreal 5 engine to design the healthy city in VR. And so he wants to use the gaming technology for medicine as a doctor. So that's the future. It's coming pretty fast now. So I think I'm very optimistic about applications. And the good part is that you don't need to be a VR developer. You don't need an architect. You just have to partner with gamers who know how to design, and then architects or designers, and just work with them and say, here's what I want. And you're more like the general contractor. And then you just bring it together. And then it happens really fast. And the reason why I say that, 3 years ago, we worked with this 24-year-old gamer from Unity. And he says, oh, I don't use Unreal. He says, can you build this regenerative village out of Stanford, 4 blocks? And he said, I'll try. In 2 weeks, he taught himself Unreal, and he built the whole thing in detail, everything. And there was fish in the ponds and things, high res with sunlight going there and butterflies and the light and all the plants, high res. And we're going, how'd you do it so fast? And he says, oh, I don't know. I was kind of bored. And so one of the things that we learned is never underestimate the creativity of game developers. They can, and there's millions of them out there now. So I think you don't have to worry about being a designer. Just work with a gamer. It's easier. And I think if we do that and focus more on the use cases, why are you using it? What do you want to do? is it medical, health, STEAM education, whatever? I think that's the most important. Not so much the technology, because that's changing, and then developers, they learned it anyway. So it's almost a moot issue for most people. The developers will do all the learning for you. But thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Professor Kimberly.
Hi, good evening, good morning, wherever you're from. Yeah, let's talk about this a little bit. My first experience with utilizing this kind of technology was back in 1993 at UNC Chapel Hill. I was one of the, I guess you call them lead engineers working on the North Carolina Information Network Highway. And what we were doing was building out one of the first broadband networks, fiber, asynchronous transfer mode. And we were integrating Research Triangle Park. So I had to go out to UNC Chapel Hill a good bit. And in one of the labs, they were working with what we called simulation type technology. And you would put on this headset, get on a bike, all kinds of wires all over you, and, ride it. And my first experience with this, when I got done, I thought, wow, that's very cool. But I'm going to invest in psychology because that's really messing with your brain. Right? Like you are just totally immersed into a world that did not exist in the room that you were in. And I think we called it simulation technology. Now, the project that I was working on, North Carolina Information Network Highway, was pretty famous for its time. And we were building this out for all of the things that we were talking about today, that Rob was talking about, for the use of medical, right? For the use of education, for the use of the military, right? All of this great broadband was for the use of all of these wonderful things. And we literally transferred the first MRI via the network in 1993. Okay, literally did the first transfer. And we watched doctors literally sit there and cry and say, we are going to save so many lives with this technology. All right. We literally did the first video classes ever in North Carolina, the very first. And we took F students who were in summer school and, kids who didn't like to dress up and who had attitude. And we changed them over, and they were coming to class, behaving themselves, participating, and increase their grade point averages. All right. So we were doing a proof of concept of how great this technology was. And all of a sudden we get a couple of senators or a senator who said, you know what, this is great and awesome. We really don't want to invest in being the first of this kind of technology. So we're going to pull the plug on this. Oh my God, like we're already millions of dollars invested, right? We're showing proof of concepts of improving education for children who need it, improving medical. God knows, well, I already knew what the military was using it for, so we won't even go there. But here's the thing. They didn't want to pay for it. So you know who paid for it? Something that we were talking about. Gaming and porn. Gaming and porn paid for the development and build out. Yeah, you're nodding your head. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was. I know it was. I was there. Okay. And so gaming and porn paid for everything that we're using today in the internet at high bandwidth speeds. Now we're talking about virtual reality, right? Augmented reality. But you know what? There's one reality that we really didn't define. I guess some people call it virtual reality. Some people call it augmented, but it's one of my favorites. And we were experimenting with this back in probably 2013 or 14. And it was with Google Glasses, right? But VisuX was my favorite. VisuX. And then as I got to using VisuX at hackathons and in labs and everything, I learned that it was actually created by the guy who invented the first Google Glasses, but Google Glasses didn't really give him all the credit for it. So he went on to do his real dream with VisuX, which actually did better than what Google Glasses could have ever dreamed of. Because why? It was done by the guy who had the origination. So don't ever sidestep the originator of any of this technology and think you can do it better. So VisuX had these glasses. And let's talk about this. I mean, what would you give the name of this? And you put these glasses on, right? Integrated with some of the technology I built and invented with, where you track other people and they're tied into it. And while you're walking in the little corner, you see someone else and their environment and walking. And guess what? My brain didn't explode. My eyes could split the visions and I could do both. How amazing is that? That we can prove human intelligence can still far super exceed what all of this technology is doing, and our brains can do it. Why? Because we only use a fraction of our brains, and this technology was taking it, splitting it, and making me use more of it. So how beautiful is that? So now, I mean, am I in a simulated world? Okay. Am I in an augmented world because I'm being diverse with technology into somebody else's world at the same time, same place, but it's real. Okay. It's not this made up cartoons and made up visual applications and animations. It's a real world, their real world. Okay. And it was working in real time. So while I was walking, they were walking. I could see what they were seeing. They could see what I was seeing. How amazing is that? I could direct them and tell them, oh, don't step in that pothole, or go over to the building over there. Turn your head. That's it. So they could look at me and see what I am doing and where I am at. So there was just so much that these glasses could do that I thought far exceeded any AR or VR, because AR and VR is what? It's just animated creation. But we're in what I call science fiction world. We are doing everything that we wrote about in science fiction over 100 years ago. And that's very cool. And yes, we can use it for training, for visibility of helping others, for exchanging information, and it's fun, right? And it's beautiful. I was just watching some virtual reality this morning on one of my favorite gaming shows, Gamers Den, which is on Pod TV, which, by the way, everyone, we're filming live. We're broadcasting live on podtv.tv on Roku right now, soon to be Amazon. So if you have Roku, go out, look up podtv.tv live, and you can watch us live. We are actually streaming live on Roku. So, but hear me out on this. We got all of these great tools and applications, but they're truly being driven, paid for by gaming. And probably, I don't know if porn's still in it or not. I mean, I can't imagine what porn would be like in some of this, but God knows the criminals use this for everything they want to too. I like this kind of technology because it does create an environment for the youth to get more educated and involved, right? It keeps their minds busy. They're not doing a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing. They get involved, and maybe we can create more getting involved for them, like allowing them to build some of the technology and tools that we use, or play with it, test drive it. But it does open up the doors and gates for the younger minds who love and eat this stuff up. I just wish it got them outside more and experimenting the real nature, not just virtually, but out there. One of the other things I want to add is that this technology is not new. Again, I've been doing it since '93. It's existed way before that because it was in the labs being developed. So it took some time to get there. But since '93, I've been dabbling in it. So it's always kind of, everybody wants to say it's new. It's not. The metaverse has been something that we've kind of dabbled with, especially during COVID. There were several tools that popped into my lap that I thought, wow, this is really cool, because you're actually walking around in this conference building. One of my inventions has been integrated into what I call, I guess you call kind of a virtual reality. Again, it's where people wear trackers. Architecture of a facility of where you're from is embedded into the code that you're looking at. And now the person watching gets to see all of the people, what they're doing, where they're at, whether it's an industrial site, an oil rig, and we get to see what tools they're carrying, where they're going, and we can guide them. We can let them know when there's a disaster about to happen, and we can see where everyone went. And again, I can show you videos of this on our next show. I've got great true integrated tools that have been used. We can put trackers on people at stadiums, including the players. And you can see everything that's going on in that stadium in a virtual reality mode. It's kind of cool. What's great about this is we can each create our avatar. Like I was watching this morning. The avatar looks beautiful. It's like watching Barbie doll play all day. So, you have perfect visual capabilities with all of this. What more can we do with this? I think the door is wide open to being able to do many things. I still don't want any of this driving my car for me or flying my plane for me. But can we use this to help many other applications? And one of my favorite things is utilizing drones, right? And getting drones integrated into this world. And yes, we can, like security for schools. We've seen so many gunmen go into schools. I was watching the Uvalde videos of how easily he just walked into the school and shot everyone. I mean, what if, a drone was there, a couple drones and a couple dogs, right? That would have never happened. Nobody would have just casually walked into the school. Most schools are supposed to have one point of entry. That school did, but that guy just walked straight in. We got the videos of it. He walked right down the hallway, boom, boom, boom. It should have never happened. But if you had drones to come in, then you're not risking a human life, right? And that you have 2 or 3 drones, he can shoot one down, but the other one's shooting him back or attacking him. You got a couple of dogs involved with the drones. They're all trained together. We can solve these problems, and we're not utilizing this technology to do that. And that's what bothers me. Okay. This technology has existed for years. It's available. It's actually affordable now. Okay. We can monitor the borders of our United States, or Mexico can monitor their borders using invisible fences and drones. We don't have to put people at risk. All right. We don't have to put lives at risk. Drones can be flown by anyone nowadays. Our military are well trained for this application. And, so we're not utilizing, we don't need to build these physical walls that cost millions of dollars and are going to do nothing but become artwork down the road. Okay. We can do all this smart, and we're not utilizing the technology for it. But one of my favorite places for testing all of this stuff is at SAF's Institute. This guy has a really cool job, probably the coolest ever. I'm jealous. I get to drool over his lab. Is he gets to test every virtual reality glasses, headsets, technology out there. And I think that's pretty phenomenal. But the thing is I would love to do a hackathon, a global hackathon of where to next with this technology. I'm not too crazy about the metaverse. I don't think it helps us. It doesn't really do anything to help us. It's just fun. I think we need to do a next to hackathon. Where do we want to go? And what problems can we really solve and solve them? And so when I look at AR versus VR versus the glasses that I love, and I wish we could come up with a name of those glasses, because I don't think it's either one of them, because we're not integrating you into a virtual world. We're integrating you into another person's reality. So I think what we need to do is kind of look at some of those things, realize that we have entered the next gateway into technology, and where do we take it from there? And I think the answers reside in conversations like this, but they also reside in our youth and in the schools. And that's where we need to start bringing these conversations. And Sharif, as always, I love this panel. I think it's some of the most intelligent conversations in the world right now on this use of technology. And if you allow me to, next time, I'll bring a video clip of the use of this technology, integrating real people for real life uses, saving real lives.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent, Professor Kim. We always welcome you to engage with any of your videos, any of your research with our community, because you know that World Talent Economy Forum, we produce our show. It's 100% free. Actually, many of the youth community from Asia Pacific, they utilizing our content for their development purpose. So any of you have a better idea, you can share with us, and definitely we will execute it. So this is a really excellent discussion for us. Now I have to go for the concluding remarks for today's session. Before I go to Mr. David Schumacher, I request everyone, because here actually those who joined for today's sessions, all of them actually from North America. I'm a big fan of the North American culture. Everybody taking actions, everybody try to do something, especially my friend, Mr. David Schumacher, he's sick, but still he joined. This is actually big inspiration for our Asia Pacific youth communities. That is the way we should contribute for the global community. And we said that Professor David Smith, Professor Sharidan Tatsuno, Professor Kimberly, Professor Rob, everybody, they actually supporting our project. So I want to give special thanks to all of our speakers because of their support, because of their cooperations. Professor David Schumacher, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Yeah, thank you, Sharif. I want to echo what you just said. I want to thank David, Rob, Professor Kimberly, and Sheridan. You piqued my interest in the topic even more than I have, and I feel the excitement that's been created. I think that's really good for your viewing audience, Sharif. Let's pique the interest of the youth, and let's see where they take this. I'm grateful in my past for movies of all things, keeping the public interested via entertainment. Sometimes I don't like how movies portray technology and the future, but in this area, I think they've done a great job. If you look way back to movies like Tron, they kind of opened the door of the idea of integrating humans and an artificial landscape. And I don't think it was appreciated as much back then. I don't think I appreciated it as much back then as I do now, the pioneering aspect of that movie. And in more recent years, we've had action movies where a lot of it is done on green screen. And what's seen behind is virtual, what the actors portraying in front. And we suspend disbelief, and we can believe that the things that we're seeing on that screen, at least for a while, we can believe that they're true. And I think this creates an acceptance for being able to integrate the virtual and the augmented and with what we consider to be day-to-day reality. So all of that has kept interest and excitement as well. Now, in my opening remarks, I mentioned about 2017 being a pivotal year with software development kits coming from a couple major players and being able to uh, empower developers to be able to not have to start from scratch each time they built an application and being able to build off of that. The tools are becoming better and better. I also said at that time that I didn't see any particular strong, dominant application, no killer app. Since then, we've had some applications emerge, as Rob spoke about quite clearly, in the industrial area, especially, and industrial encompassing military and hospitals and so forth, but all of that being non not technologies for the general public. I think a technology for the general public that I get really excited about, and I'm even more so after listening to some of the people on the talk today, is a form of telepresence. In my systems engineering role some years back, I put in telepresence for corporations, which allowed people to sit around the table virtually. And you actually had like half a table in a room, and it had large screens, and you could see the people sitting on the other side, and you could do everything but reach across the table and shake their hands. And that was quite good for its day. But now where I see the technology going is that telepresence, uh, allowing us to have much more of an immersive environment while still maintaining what we have in front of us. And I think that's one that can really go social as well. As I've mentioned on this show before, I have friends all across the United States, which is a big place, and friends in countries outside of the United States that I socialize with. And I'm just thinking, what would I pay to be able to sit down and have an experience that's much like talking with them across the kitchen table? And being able to do that where both of us can participate really well. So that's something that I think can be an outgrowth of how we're seeing telepresence with AR used today by inspectors and instructors and so forth. Anyway, a lot of excitement. That's the common theme to my closing remarks. And continuing with that excitement, as Sharif briefly talked about, is I'm going to need to take a few weeks off while I have a procedure done next week and then recover from that. But I want you to know I'll be watching you. Keep doing a good job. Keep doing a good
Thank,
job. And Dr. Sharif, thank you for being the orchestrator of all of this. Thanks.
thank you, Professor David Schumacher, for all of your support. Professor David Smith.
I echo David's comments there and the impact, Sharif, which you have on this. Let me just say a couple of things in some closing remarks. I often talk about market size, and the AR VR market size back in 2020 was right at $15 billion. It's predicted to be right at $500 billion by 2030. So that's a pretty good growth rate. It's a growth rate of over 40% compound annual growth rate. So it really is moving up into market acceptance. As many said, it's used in the commercial sector, it's used in the private sector. We're also seeing a lot of growth with it in the small and medium business segment today and how that can be used. I'm excited to see it being used to solve problems. I'm excited to see it being used to enhance people's analysis and what can be done. And you know, it's interesting when technology passes a tipping point where technology is no longer there for technology's sake, but technology is there to solve real world problems and really help on real world needs. If I'm in a university, if I'm an entrepreneur, there are thousands and thousands of applications that can be used, particularly of augmented reality and extended reality technology, and it done. You know, I saw a demonstration of an augmented reality approach for flying drones. So instead of holding your remote control in front of you, you can up there, and it will actually track your eyes, and your eyes can steer the drone. So you don't have to have the joystick and all that. So it's really beginning to come up there, and the benefits for it are fantastic. And the biggest limiting factor today is still hardware and how that is. And we're seeing great enhancements on the hardware. And from what I've seen in some labs recently, I think the future over the next couple of years will surprise all of us on the panel today with what will happen there. I've seen this technology be used in an analyst role, be able to look at a lot of data, a lot of images, and synthesize outputs from it in ways that you can't do sitting here looking at 3 monitors in front of you, in just that type of impact. But Sharif, you often ask the impact in developing nations. This is a game changer for a lot of developing nations because it's portable hardware and it can be used dramatically to be customized to serve local needs and to solve local needs. So the future's bright, and it's just up to our imagination how we want to use it to solve those problems, Sharif. So thank you again, and thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Mr. Sheridan Tatsuno.
Very good. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm really excited by listening to all of you because you're saying all these things, I've never heard of before. Okay. I actually have this three comments. One is I'm really excited about science. The James Webb photos just totally blew me away. I'm sorry. And because, I was, if we could use VR, I could like explore the universe, in 3D, right? So, and the reason why I say that, in 2015, NASA Ames let me drive a virtual rover using their headset on their virtual Mars, which they composited from, the flyover. And it was really high res. It was like driving a car down San Francisco streets. It was really high res. So I could drive anywhere into the gullies and all. So that blew me away. And I said, I want to see NASA use it for all space. And that would make it exciting for it because you could really see it. And here's the thing. I'm from Silicon Valley. I grew up, and I'm a futurist in three ways. One is I love science, like NASA and marine and anything. Earth sciences. And we, for example, NASA, Ames, when we went to the moon, and it really excited people. And then we had Star Wars because George Lucas said, I think I'm going to bring, Flash Gordon back because of NASA. And, so let's show what science can, what we could do in movies. And so, and most of the Silicon Valley folks, I'm being frank, they're all Star Wars fans. Pixar, everybody grew up on Star Wars saying, wow, we could do amazing things that you couldn't even imagine. So that's why we like fiction. We like sci-fi, because sci-fi is really a vision of possible futures, right? We could have utopias or dystopias. Unfortunately, we have a lot of dystopias. On the other hand, you could create a lot of utopias. So I think you could do that. As an urban planner, okay, a little background, we think 100 to 250 years out, all right? And the reason, it's like the ancient Romans, when you build a highway or a university, you don't destroy it in 10 years. Right? You plan, the university better last at least 100 years, if not 200 to 300 years, because it's so expensive, and the infrastructure and people, and everything, and the knowledge base. So so one thing good about VR and sci-fi, you can actually create and visualize 200 years out. And what we used to do in urban planning, you can walk around through it and actually populate with people and run scenarios and do whatever you want. So now what blew me away about VR when I first saw it a long time ago now is that it's even better than sci-fi. And the reason is sci-fi, you can imagine it in your brain, but in VR, we actually built the stuff in detail and you can actually see it, avatars or whatever you want. So that's 1,000 times more powerful than just reading about it. Okay, that's why I think George Lucas, when he did it. Now, ILMX is working with NVIDIA right now for all the Star Wars series, and they are with the Omniverse. NVIDIA are going to totally blow everybody away because they're bringing on the Lucasfilm team into this. And so you're going to see stuff out of the filmmakers that will totally blow everybody away. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. And then finally, just on a very pragmatic level, I believe in the scientific method. And basically, in other words, work with the reality we have today. Okay? Because I'm an urban planner. We start with reality. See, we have society is totally messed up. The world's messed up. The climate problems, food shortage. We've got tons of problems. So my suggestion is pick a why, something that you're passionate about, that you love, that you want to make right. It could be anything. For example, if you're a Black American, you say, what does a beautiful Black paradise with nice food and health, what does that look like? Okay, so pick the why and then get your team and then do your vision, and that's more like sci-fi and planning kind of combination of your ideal future, and then build it. And find your VR developers and your musicians. And the other thing too is that make it fun. So much of this stuff is so boring to try. I hate to say a lot of the climate science is boring, but it's actually really exciting. So for example, I wrote this novel, the last one in my series on it's called Cosmically San Francisco. And the mayor challenges all the kids, especially the Black Latino kids, right, to go into space. They create their virtual, and they create their virtual Mars, except this, instead of the bland antiseptic NASA, they create it look like the Mission District or the Fillmore with hip hop and rap music and all that, because he said it's boring in space. and they make it really colorful, and all those spacesuits are like cool, hip, because that reflects their culture, not some sort of antiseptics. So I think the culture is going to really drive this one. And I think the educators are going to, like Professor Calhoun, thank you so much for your leadership. Especially, and I think the children need guidance. So we need people who've been there before and have the experience and the wisdom of what can do, what you can't do. But more important is kind of ethics and morals. But to create a positive why and then help them build it. And I think if we do that, you're going to see some amazing changes. Right now, the big challenge is a shortage of affordable housing. I would like to see the United States, there's an article today in New York Times, how can we build 20 million or 10 million affordable housing units, tiny homes, things like that in VR. And you can do it right now, actually. But that's the kind of challenge I'd like to see. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Kimberly, what's your concluding remarks?
I'll try to wrap this up fast. My concluding advice is that we're at a wonderful present opportunity to build out the future, as you had mentioned. And thank you for the compliment. I think we're all amazing leaders. And what we need to do is unite together to make this happen. And I couldn't agree more why we are not using this to solve the problems, especially for the homeless. I mean, it'd just be so easy to do. But again, we are taking what science fiction wrote and we've put it to real life, and we just need to continue to expand on it. I mean, I can't wait to see what it's going to taste like, right? I mean, can they really nail the food in all this science fiction world? And I'm still very leery about utilizing any of this to drive for me or fly for me or do a lot of things for me, because I still feel like artificial intelligence would not make the true right decisions that are intended for quality of life or even to save a life. I don't think it's there yet. I don't think it has the empathy required. Like they show in the movies iRobot, Total Recall, let's talk about the movies. Total Recall was probably one of the first big ones. And then Love, Death, Robot. Upload is one of the more current ones. A little eerie, but this is where things are going. And if you want to watch where science fiction is taking us, those are some interesting ones. And thank you, Sharif. I think that this is becoming a university type show in what technology is and where it's leading us. And I want to thank you for that and this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kimberly. Also, you also supporting our projects. You are broadcasting through your TV channels, and all of the speakers, those who continuously support World Talent Economy Forum. I want to give thanks. Now we have our real university from nothing. We have our real students, our campus. I want to invite you all. We are growing because all of your support. And that is the beauty of this World Talent Economy Forum. Basically, we are growing with our developing nations peoples, with the help of developed nations people. And most important thing is that what I find in this academic industry, I find that we are developing the future nations. We are developing the future generations, and modern science, engineering, and technology is very, very important for all of them. And I can ensure that from the developing nations, many countries, even prime minister office, universities, different corporate agencies, they support our projects and they're joining in our projects. So next 1 year, we have a lot of excitement, lot of interesting project, including Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. We actually working with few countries, including Malaysia, Singapore, and India Prime Minister Office. They are actually working with us. So hopefully, with all of your support, we can make a meaningful knowledge-based community, because there is a huge gap in between developed nations and developing nations. So maybe we can uplift more young generations, and the young generation, they can build the future. That is the way we can contribute. Thank you, Professor David Schumacher, Professor Sharidan Tatsuno, Professor Kimberly, for your continuous support. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government, with corporations, and with academia. And thank you. Bye-bye and take care.